Venture X from Capital One is the travel card for people always asking,
where next?
You earn 10x miles on hotels and rental cars, and 5x miles on flights booked through Capital One Travel, and 2x miles on everything else you buy with Venture X. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 71 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union, better known by all of us by now as simply DCU. I've been calling them that for decades. You know what I mean. And whether you're driving off the lot or refinancing, DCU can help you save on your next auto loan with rates as low as 1.49% APR. Yes, I'm serious. Rates as low as 1.49% APR. So if you're looking for an auto loan, whether you want to drive off the lot with a new car or refinance, well, you got to reach out to DCU. You can learn more at dcu.org/auto. Insured by the NCUA, membership required. That's dcu.org/auto. Okay, this week's episode is so old school, but it's with a guy that's not old enough to be that old school. Or is he? I got a chance to talk to Nick Reese, the lead singer of the band Joyous. And this band, I truly believe, is part of the next generation of great American rock bands. Now, I had to wake him up early. Unfortunately, he was moving because he's on tour, and we had some reception issues. So I just want to get that out first thing, because you're going to hear him, but that's what happens when you're trying to interview a working rock band that's literally out on tour. Nick Reese and I talked about a lot of stuff, including inspiration. And if you're not familiar with Joyous Wolf's music, well, there's a ton of it in the corresponding playlist for this episode. It's linked in the show notes. Matter of fact, there's a corresponding playlist for every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast. But as I was talking to Nick, I really got the impression that he is a very old rock and roll soul. He grew up in a house where music was everywhere, and so he was inspired by it all. And you'll hear him talk about it in the episode. He very early on figured out that he could sing and play the guitar and, well, some other things you'll hear him talk about. His musical tastes are eclectic and fascinating. So just imagine he's driving down the highway, having just gotten woken up, clutching a cup of coffee, trying to answer my questions first thing in the morning. And he couldn't have been more gracious while he was doing it. We talked about his vocal health, his inspiration, his style of songwriting, and how the band met. We talked about the music that he grew up listening to with his parents, and some of the bands that he's been fortunate enough to tour with. And I got a little bit of info about the upcoming new album that'll be out in early 2022. If you are a lover of rock and roll, if you love the Delta blues, if you just love the guitar, well, you are going to love Joyous Wolf. So allow me to introduce you to Nick Reese from Joyous Wolf.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Nick.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's not often that I drag somebody out of bed, so I apologize for making you get up so early.
No, it's okay. Just on the road, ready to tear it up.
You guys are out on the road, and you played at a venue the other night that is so legendary when it comes to rock and roll. You played the Viper Room. How was that?
Yeah, we played the Viper a lot, but this time was really good because, well, honestly, it was my favorite show we've ever played because, we filled the entire club out and things were spectacular. The crowd was amazing. They knew the words to the songs, and it was really incredible. Like, the atmosphere was electric, and I don't know, it was just one of those really special moments I don't think I'll ever forget.
A lot of bands are having these kind of amazing emotional responses getting back out on the stage, like you're talking about, where the crowd, it seems like the audience needs to be there as much as you need to be there as well. And we've waited so long to be able to have shows, and even though things aren't the way that we want them to be, completely open and everyone healthy, emotionally, I think for everyone, going to these shows is very cathartic.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of therapeutic elements to it. I think for sure what is very different is just that this is the first show, that was the first show we played, since we entered the top 40 with Fearless, and, it really showed, because KLOS hosted it back home, who've been supporters of us ever since we were able to play actual concerts. Like, our first real concert we ever played was with them hosting it, and them backing up the show was just made it even, cherry on top, really.
For people that aren't familiar with the band, can you go back to the formation of the band and tell me the story? Because there are a handful of bands I can think of that met when they were that young.
Yeah, so I was probably I had just turned 20 years old. Not even, no, I think I was still 19 years old. And I'll start with Blake. I was post band practice, my old band that I was in at the time, which was a little alternative band, alternative, kind of pop rocky band. And I remember we were at Guitar Center, and if you've ever been to a Guitar Center, especially one at a mall during the summertime, it's a loud, annoying place to be, because everyone's playing in different keys, playing different songs, different time signatures, all at the same time. So it just sounds like,
it's like that scene in Wayne's World where they're like, "No stairway, dude."
I wish they would have enforced that, because there must have been at least 30 different stairways happening at that moment. But it was 2014, so it was Stairway, and then also Drive by Incubus, and whatever else you could think of that was in the top 50 at the time or whatever. But yeah, so I couldn't handle it because my head was already pounding from practice, and I retreated to the acoustic guitar room, and that's where I sat down, and I was the only one in there, so it was actually really nice, a moment to myself, peace and quiet. And I'm just strumming up, banging on a guitar or whatever, playing whatever I was playing. And then this guy walks in, and he's got this big curly hair, I'd never seen anybody with hair like that, that wasn't, female. and he was picked up a resonator guitar, and he was having trouble tuning it. And I had brought my tuner from home. Working in a music store myself at the time I was employed by Sam Ash Music Stores. So it's a miracle I didn't burst into flames being inside that guitar center. No, I brought a guitar tuner and I tossed it to him. He tuned up and he got the thing, playable. And I asked him if he wanted to jam. And that was how I met Blake. And we probably played for probably all of 7-10 minutes, went our separate ways, but I added him on Facebook and I guess he liked my singing voice. Okay. He's like, you're in a band? And I was like, yeah. He's like, do you need a guitar player? And I was like, no, sorry. But I'm, hey, you never know. Maybe something will happen. And if something does, maybe I'll do a side thing or whatever. I'll call you. And he's like, yeah, sure. And that was it. And I didn't see him again for like 7 months. And then Robert, the drummer, I knew him. I met him on orientation day for middle school. We met just because, of roll call, my last name has R, his last name has S. So he sat right behind me and that's it.
It's so crazy. That's what I mean when I talk about bands that go back that far, that you could just get sat in front of somebody in homeroom in middle school and end up that's the person you're meant to be in a band with.
Yeah, it's pretty strange. The more sometimes when things happen, we'll talk about those times, how bizarre they really are. And the thing is, so Rob's one of my best friends, like ever, and he ended up going to a different high school though, but he still lived a couple blocks down the street from my house. It wasn't like I didn't see him ever again or anything. So he went to a different high school, and that's where he met Greg. And if he never would have went to that high school, he would have never met Greg. And Greg actually had just transferred high schools at the time too. So, it was just kind of brought together, and they became friends. And it was just a weird thing where they didn't join any bands really. They played in a couple of our friends' things, but never anything serious. But they just jammed for years. They just played bass and drums together for years.
When you were growing up, did you realize you could sing first or play the guitar first?
Those kind of came hand in hand. I learned guitar to be able to sing along too. So it was never one or the other, because, excuse me 1 second. Yeah, it happened simultaneously. What I do remember though is actually dancing came first. I was a dancer. Dancing was something I was able to do from a really early age. I don't exactly know why. My mom said I saw James Brown on TV. It was a documentary about the Tammy Show back in 1964, and he was doing Night Train, his famous dance from Night Train. And I got up and started sliding around on the floor in my socks, and that became a big part of my DNA, is just moving to music. And the fact I could move to music was pretty important, because that's kind of what I do. But yeah, singing and playing guitar came together, and I had the worst guitar hero ever, Elvis Presley. So I just learned how to bang on my guitar really hard and sing the blues.
Did your parents buy you your first guitar? How old were you?
They did, but they wanted to discourage me. So they bought me a beginner who had no idea about guitars. They bought me a guitar with a Floyd Rose, and which, to anyone who knows guitars and isn't familiar with Floyd Rose, it's kind of cruel. and they didn't give me an amp. They gave me this little pocket amp, little plug it into your headphones kind of thing.
Well, they didn't want to deal with the noise.
Oh, they didn't want me to be a musician. They really didn't. And I was honestly a terrible singer too. I was absolutely dreadful, to the point where they sat me down and were like, Nick, there's something called tone deafness. And it's okay. And I remember that made me so angry. I was so unbelievably mad that I sang every single day. And I don't think I've stopped since.
So where did it come from that they didn't want you to be a singer? Are they part of the music industry and that's why they wanted to steer you away from it? Or did they just want you to be a lawyer?
A lot of my family was part of the music industry, and it didn't work out so well for them, including my father. So, but eventually, I think, even though my dad was saying no, he was kind of slowly nudging me in that direction anyways.
So what kind of music was on in the house when you were growing up? Like, obviously James Brown, Elvis Presley, stuff like that. But what made you go, that's what I want to do?
I mean, it's funny because all the music I loved as a kid, my mom and dad, are children of like the 70s and 80s. My mom was a teen and my dad was, in his early 20s and in the 80s. So at like 60s through that period, a lot of new wave music, whatever. But my parents were strange because they just, they're kind of snobs. So I heard nothing but jazz and like 1950s, rock and roll. Like rock and roll to me was like what rock and roll was to someone who was born in 1940. Like I liked Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, and guys like that. That was rock and roll to me. Like these crazy characters. And my dad was a rockabilly guy in the 80s, so he had a ton of records left over and a bunch of cassette tapes and a lot of the clothes he still had, pictures, and so I was enthralled by 1950s rock music, and that was like the beginning of stuff for me. And the jazz singers, like obviously, like crooners like Frank Sinatra and whatever, but then you get like people like Billie Holiday. It was a really nice household to grow up with. I'm glad I did. To this day, music is a part of everything my family does. Every meal, every outing, every drive. It's not something that's like a piece of our day. It's like the entire day. The day doesn't start until somebody presses play. And, that soaking that up from a young age, there's a lot of understanding of the music that I have, and a lot of old country and a lot of root music in America. I discovered the blues through my love of Elvis because, he was an admirer of the blues. I had this book called The Elvis Encyclopedia, and anything that had anything to do with him was in that book. So, and alphabetized. So I learned about all the artists he loved, and through him I learned about, I took that knowledge and I learned about what influenced those artists. And that's how I learned about Delta blues artists, and that's what really kind of grabbed me when I heard B.B. King for the first time. When I heard Muddy Waters live in Newport, when I heard that record for the first time, I remember that making me stop as a kid and being like, this is awesome. I don't know what it is, but it's awesome. What's this guy talking about? I don't know, but it's awesome.
People that have innate musical ability, they process it differently. Are you somebody that learns by ear? Are you somebody that learns by lesson and reading music? Like, how did you get into playing?
Ear completely. I'm the only musical theory I know is whatever's rubbed off of Robert Craig and Blake these last 7 years. So yeah, I mean, which is true, by the way. It's been 7 years. Oh my God. Almost like 6.5, but it's still, but yeah, the guys have taught me a lot about that part of music. But how I learned was strictly just by listening. And I was always a good mimic. I could always do people's voices, and I could always imitate sounds. And when I was a kid, I'd like imitate like machine guns and like C-3PO or whatever. Like I loved to mimic things. That's kind of how I learned, is like I'd listen to Elvis records and I'd like press play and I listened to a certain part and then I'd try to emulate what I heard, and did it poorly, obviously, because I don't sound like Elvis too much, I don't think, but I tried to. I think there's a little bit of Elvis in there, but so it was really just about my ear and training my ear and learning about, okay, is this in key?
When you are writing a song, like, I'm fascinated by the process of it and what goes on in your head, because I'm not a person that has musical ability. And so your brain is processing these notes and you're learning all by ear. Do you see things in your head processing the notes? Like, talk me through like what's actually going on in your brain as you're writing a song or playing your guitar or writing lyrics. Like is it tied to visual? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's always been visual for me. Like, I write what I feel, and then that's not like some groundbreaking comment, but for me, it's always been visual. Like, whenever the guys will play something or I'll play something by myself, whatever the chording or the mood of the song sounds like is what inspires the lyric. One of the songs we have called "Feel the Low," for example, is something that Blake wrote. This melodic, really pretty little piece from our first record, and if you listen to that, I don't think it's too hard to grasp that that's the title and that's the lyric that I came up with, because it filled my mind with a sort of melancholy attitude, and it reminded me of certain things that had happened to some friends of ours at that time. Or one time, a long time ago, we had a song, and when I heard it for the first time, it reminded me of like marching Roman legions. And also the song "Mother Rebel" we have is I wrote about Harriet Beecher Stowe and the Civil War, because I don't know, it's got that kind of southerny twang to it with the slide guitar, and that's just what I pictured happening in my head. I saw soldiers, I saw that kind of thing.
How does it work with the band when it comes to writing? Does somebody bring a riff into the room? Does the band work on the music and then you concentrate on the lyrics and the melody? How does that process work within the band?
We all write together. Sometimes, like Blake will bring something in that's pretty common. He'll bring in like, hey, I got this riff, or I got this thing. What do you guys think? And then we'll just kind of jam on it for like ever. And this new record that we just finished a few months ago, it was very much just that exact process was like, hey, here's something, maybe this is something. And we went back through like 2 years worth of phone demos and little pieces we had recorded, and sifted through all of them to see, okay, is this good? What do you think of this? Is this good? Just to kind of revisit everything. So we had a bunch to, kind of start the foundation of what the album would be. And it's really just a process of the four of us, bouncing off each other. And it's always noticeable when, okay, this is something, because you can feel it in the room and everybody's like, okay, yeah. And sometimes somebody might be behind a little bit, but eventually they catch up and like, oh, okay. Because if 3 people like something and one person doesn't, the person who doesn't like it can be like, you know what, if the 3 of you like it, there must be something to this. So, I'll just keep with it and we'll see where it goes. And that's kind of our rule of thumb, is like we always try things. We never not, I mean, there were certain songs on the new album that we had like rewritten and written and rewritten and written and written, and the only thing was like recognizable was like a 30-second part that we just loved, and everything else kept changing because we hated it. So it's a constant process of trial and error, and really just the four of us connecting creatively, I think.
You've played shows and spent time with guys like Buck Cherry and Dirty Honey that have been on the show before, and those bands are so kind of old school in their stripped down, straight ahead, blues driven kind of rock and roll. And it goes to show that, you know, what was old is new again. Can you talk to me about what you think rock and roll is moving towards? Because everything is so cyclical. And of course, there have been people saying that rock is dead for decades.
They seem to say it every 10 years that it's dead. So I don't really understand. I think rock is dead in the sense that as people knew it. And I think my whole thing that I've been preaching since we first started this band is that people need to let go. You know, every generation, you know, I think of rock and roll like a car, you know, and every generation, you know, the old guys got to give the young guys the keys, you know, here, son, the car is yours. The family car is yours now. And it's like, sick, I'm gonna paint some flames on it. No, don't paint flames on it. It's my car now. You can't, you know. Or I'm gonna paint, I don't know, Hello Kitty on it. You know, whatever. It's, you know, that's the whole thing I always say is that it's not gonna be exactly what you remember, because why would it? And I think that's a big thing for Joyous Wolf, as you know, us as a band, is that we kind of fill that out. I think a little more than some of the other bands. In the sense that we just kind of don't care about any of the rock and roll machismo, especially because it doesn't really make sense to us because we don't have any relatability to that. You know, we're four guys from Orange County, California. We live 15 minutes from Disneyland. Like, we're not a grunge band. We're not, you know, I think it's just like we took rock and roll as we love it, because we love classic rock and we love, you know, the root music of it all, and we worship those bands and those who have come before us, you know, like with the utmost respect and integrity. And I think rock and roll is just changing into something different, and that might seem scary to some. It might seem like, oh, it's not the thing that I remember, but that's not a bad thing, because that's how it always is. You know, the Talking Heads are as rock and roll to me as Led Zeppelin is, or as the Kinks are, you know, or as Mississippi Fred McDowell is, or, you know, like, to me it's all the same. It's just, you know, you work in the same field, just in different areas. And I think rock and roll is just right now is there's so many amazing bands like Dirty Honey and so I'm just playing. It's still too early in the morning. Like Dirty Honey and the band The Rebel, New Jersey, and of course like. Oh yeah, Broken Love from Canada, and another Canadian band, Crownlands, and there's some amazing new rock bands that are on the come up right now, and you know that are bringing something. They're bringing their personalities to the music, and personality is everything. Anyone can just stand up, and anyone who can hold a note and play a lick can play cover songs and do stuff like that and phone it in, but to bring your own personality, your own perspective, your own feel to the music is what makes it important, and that's the most important thing for rock and roll. And it's great to be part of a wave like this, and it's great to see so many amazing bands have their own particular styles that are inspired from all sorts of different places and musical mechanisms, and it's wonderful. And that's what's most importantly, the thing, as I always say, is that rock is dead, but its rebirth is what's exciting to me.
Well, and you're so right, too, when it comes to the geography. You know, for somebody like you that grew up in Southern California, it's impossible for you to, like, understand why, you know, I'll take myself as an example, why music from Boston might be more angry because you don't deal with 30 below zero wind chills in January, or,
Not to say there's nothing to be angry about in California.
No. But it does, when you talk about the Seattle grunge movement, like it is an external factor that does influence what comes out of that area. And, you talk about bands like Incubus or the Red Hot Chili Peppers that are these famous Southern California bands, but then you move a little bit and you get into like Bakersfield and Korn, and it's a totally different thing. And the 80s rock that came off the Sunset Strip, there are all of these different kind of sounds, but it's just one ingredient into whatever it is that you're making.
Yeah, it's for us it's very much like wow, we really don't like it here too much, but oh well. I think that's what fuels all great music. It's like, man, I don't know if I like it here.
Yeah, it's rock and roll doesn't get made when people are super happy a lot of the time.
Not really.
There's a certain amount of struggle that's required. We talked about Buckcherry a little bit. You spent some time with those guys on the road. I've known Josh a long time. One thing I know about him is how strict he is taking care of his voice. What are you doing to take care of your voice out on the road?
I hydrate a lot. I drink like 2 gallons of water a day. I try to talk softly, which is why my usual tone of voice is not happening right now. I try not to speak.
I talked to Miles Kennedy recently, and he said that the thing that hurts his voice the most is just talking.
Yeah, it's funny because my whole, my whole vocal change, the last year and a half has been because of Miles in a big way, because we toured with them in 2019 with Slash and Miles Kennedy, and I got to talk to him a little bit about that. And I watched him on stage, and it was extremely inspiring. And that's what made me sought out my vocal coach, Melissa Cross, and what really changed, because over the pandemic, I had nothing but time, so I completely relearned how to sing from the ground up.
Her voice, her name comes up pretty often when I interview musicians and singers, obviously, specifically, that she's this person that singers hold up as a god.
She is very much a genius, and she's done more for me vocally than anyone ever.
What else did you spend time doing during the lockdown when you had all that free time? Anything non-music related?
No. After the first 3 months of pain, and getting over the depression of it, the guys and I reconvened and started working on the record. And that was a long, arduous process.
And talking about inspiration coming from misery, I think there's going to be a lot of great rock and roll coming out in the next couple of years.
I think it'll be a lot of great and a lot of terrible. And that's how I feel about it, because I already know that just because bad things happen doesn't mean good art happens. That's a myth. Sometimes too much misery makes music worse.
Yeah. It's like you need that just enough. Yeah. I was going to ask you for an example, and then I was like, maybe he's not going to want to talk shit, but you're kind of right.
I love Morrissey, but
he is pretty miserable.
I think it was Robert Smith who said, "I write sad songs, but Morrissey's songs make me want to kill myself."
And that's such a Robert Smith thing to say too, because I'm such a huge Cure fan that, and when you think about him, you do think about someone that is so sad but is able to turn it into these amazing songs, but it's like he's just sad enough.
Yeah.
Can I talk to you about songwriting? I ask this question of every songwriter I have on the show. And the question is, from a songwriter's perspective, that can you give me an example or two of a song that you think is crafted so perfectly that you covet it and say, oh, I wish I wrote that song because it's so good. It's not so much a song you just love, but a song you love because of the craft. And can you break down why you love it so much?
Man, there's so many different kinds of songs for different reasons, but I'll give you like some opposing sides of the spectrum here. I think Lingus by Snarky Puppy, which is this fusion jazz, like epic, is a perfect song. Like if you want to just go on an adventure, put that song on. It's like I wish my mind could work that way. I wish I could detail musically like a song like that. But into more simplistic terms, I think "Here Comes the Sun" is probably one of the most amazing songs ever written because of it's so simple that anyone could have wrote it, but nobody did. Only one guy did, and his name's George Harrison. And he's honestly, him, and it's like I always say, he's like, oh, he's my favorite Beatle. And then I'm like, oh, wait, Paul's pretty good too. And they're all pretty great.
But he never got the credit because he got stuck in the shadow of the Lennon-McCartney kind of songwriting prowess. But George Harrison is a fantastic songwriter.
I mean, and I think even he himself was like, well, of course I am, because I worked with John and Paul, but, and that's kind of how, that's what happens when you're in a band. You take pieces from everybody and then you put yourself into it, but I'm trying to think, Mr. Brightside by the Killers, like, because that song is just, for my generation, it's just like, it's just an anthem, it's just it's a perfect tune. You listen to that song, there's not an inch of fat on that song, and it's just perfect. And every little hook and every little counter melody is perfect. And what else?
Well, you mentioned epic. Are you talking about Faith No More epic?
I think even more epic than Faith No More. I think Bohemian Rhapsody is a perfect song. I mean, to the point where you play it anywhere. Who does not know that song? But it's a 7-minute song. There's not too many 7-minute songs that become number one, So, and I mean, I honestly I could say that for a lot of Queen songs. Like,
and it's not even just the length of it. It's it violates every rule almost as to what would work in rock and roll.
But that's kind of the point, is that there are no rules, and that's what they illustrated. And already that was being shown by like the, early pioneers of like the psychedelic movement. We were starting, and Brian Wilson, like people who were really starting to, get really out there. Speaking of Brian Wilson, God only knows. For him, I mean, Brian Wilson, it's genius through and through. I love Brian, and I actually got to see Brian with my tour manager in 2019, which was a bucket list moment for me. And, let's think about it. California Girls, that's a perfect song. Tori Baby would be nice. Surf's Up, like you listen to those songs. I mean, I Get Around is a cheesy little song about friends driving around the city, but that song is perfect. It's a perfect little song. It's got all the hooks, it's got all the jumps, it's got all, I love the Beach Boys, but I go on about that, but it's like, that like, Maybe I'm Amazed by Paul McCartney, another song. I could go on all day. I'm going to be here all freaking day.
But that's why I love
AC/DC.
That's why I love this question so much, because music people love music, but songwriters always look at it from a different perspective, because you're looking at the blueprint of why people love the song so much. You can see the inner workings of it, where just a music fan just hears it and is like, oh, I love that, but they might not understand why they love it so much.
I mean, it's just when you see like how people break these sounds. I mean, like there's so many different kinds of songs, you know, like La Vie en Rose by like the version that Louis Armstrong did, you know, with the classic romantic, you know, cornet, you know, in the beginning. And, you know, like there's just something to the way that a song is played and the minds behind the gelling of how everything fits together. And, you know, and there's so many different people at work. I mean, like you listen to like the Thriller album and there's so many perfect songs on that record because you look at the clientele, not only do you phenom that was Michael Jackson, you also had Quincy Jones, who the greatest music of all time, you know, and it's all about these people who just have a talent for putting the things in its place. I mean, like people like Stevie Wonder, and you know, and then you can get like into like, you know, I think "Run to the Hills" by Iron Maiden is a perfect song. So it's just like there's so many perfect songs. You know, there's so many songs where I salivate at just the idea that like, how did you make this? How did just Good Vibrations, going back to Brian, I feel like Good Vibrations is Bohemian Rhapsody before Bohemian Rhapsody, because it was a song that had tons of interchangeable parts that had no relation to each other than the fact that they were what Brian Wilson heard in his head, you know, like the part with the cellos going, you know, and the mixing and matching and the pace changes, and like that was revolutionary. And, you know, like stuff like that, when my appreciation for music is just like, how do you make this simple thing work, or how did you make all of this massive thing sound simple, you know?
Well, you talk about Stevie Wonder. John Paul Jones said that it was superstition that inspired Trample Underfoot.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, completely. I mean,
yeah.
Stevie Wonder is like, him and Ray Charles to me are like two of the most gifted musicians to ever like live in our time. So like I love both of them dearly, and I honestly love like everything they've ever done. So.
Well, let's talk about your music, since you guys have spent so much time working on it. Give me the plan for the record and kind of where you're hoping the band kind of ends up next year. You've got some plans, like the Download Fest next year already, which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, we got all those European festivals. I mean, here's to hope and third time's a charm. We got our album's going to come out first quarter of next year. We don't have a concrete date yet, but we're working on it. And also, just to say for Stevie Wonder, just while we were on the topic of it, is Fearless, the new song, is inspired by Stevie Wonder. And if you listen to it, again, with that in mind, you'll totally see what I'm talking about. It was very heavily inspired by Stevie Wonder. But yeah, we have a lot of dates coming up. We're doing our headlining run right now. Dates are online. The next show is in Colorado Springs tomorrow, and looking forward to it. You know, so feeling good.
Well, I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. I know you had to get up early, which is not something anybody that works in the music business ever wants to do.
Yeah.
But okay. I love your musical knowledge and your passion for not only what's come before, but also I love the way that you kind of look at charting the new course for rock and roll with this new generation of bands that are coming out. And I was really looking forward to talking to you, because I just think that Joyous Wolf is one of these bands that is part of this next wave of great American rock bands. And so I was really happy that I got to talk to you today.
Well, we really hope so, but thank you for having me.
Anytime. Stay safe on the road. I apologize for getting you up so early, and go back to bed.
I came back for the camera. Hello. Goodbye, everybody. Follow Joyous Wolf on social media. Also me. Whatever else you want. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much. There he is, Nick Reese from Joyous Wolf. Now, you can go to the show notes of this episode of the podcast and check out the corresponding playlist. There is some great music on there, including their new single, Fearless, and a bunch of their other music as well. You'll also find the links to find the band online, and you'll find all of my links too. Special thanks once again to our sponsor, Digital Federal Credit Union at dcu.org. And if you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss anything from the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday, plus every weekday you get the Sit Rep. The Situation Report is all of your rock news, music headlines, and industry info in less than 5 minutes every weekday. Join me every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern live on my Facebook page for my video show, Cocktails in the War Room. And you can find Cocktails in the War Room and Mistress Carrie swag online in the official Mistress Carrie store at mistresscarrie.com. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
By now, you know that sound. It's the sound of the Home Depot. But what about those sounds? Those are the sounds of an LG wash tower with ultra-large capacity, serving up a powerful yet gentle clean in just 29 minutes. Making this the sound of savings on the best appliance brands. The Home Depot. How doers get more done. Get up to 25% off the LG wash tower with ultra-large capacity and reduced wash time. Pricing valid January 5th through January 25th, 2023. Gas Dryer Extra. U.S. only. See store or online for details.